Namaste from India to everyone out there.
Namaste. Namaste. We've got a COVID friendly way here of saying hello and welcoming everybody. The good old namaste. Great to be
Well,
on this show with you, Aman.
same here, bro. I'm not sure if you've seen the Chinese shows. I think it was brilliant. There's
Oh,
great
excellent
stuff
stuff.
going
Yeah,
on around.
those renders look amazing and brilliant stuff. And we're going strong, 24 hours of chaos and,
Well,
off
it's
to a
been
strong
16,
start.
16 hours now, 16 plus hours. Crazy.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. To whoever stuck it through those 16 hours, props to you.
Absolutely. For the benefit of the time, because we've got a very long, panel list today. I'm Aman, everyone. This is my third year, hosting the show. I'm founder of Decor. We do a couple of things, bunch of interesting things. We have Karan here from Green Lane Studios, and I will let Karan quickly introduce himself. Because it's first time in the show. So take
Yeah,
it away, sir.
yeah. Hi everyone. I'm Karan Parikh. I'm CEO and co-founder at Green Lane Studios. We're located in Mumbai, and Green Lane is India's first Unreal authorized training center. We're a real-time graphics studio focused on creating solutions for virtual production, animation, engineering simulations, lots of things in the real-time space. Great to be on here with you, Aman. Really excited about this event.
Well, of course, Karan. Uh, so there's an interesting stat that we have here about Green Lane, which is that you guys have actually trained around 50% of the Unreal Engine artists that we have in the country. That's super crazy, really. Uh, any
Right.
which
Yeah, we're
way.
just trying to be catalysts, in this ecosystem, and we see that change to real time, especially with things transitioning to the metaverse right now. There's a lot of demand, and we want to play that role of a catalyst in the ecosystem and really mobilize people to adopt these new workflows. And yeah, with that being said, Aman, it's really interesting to see Decor's transition as well, right? Uh, to a metaverse first entity. I mean, starting out with architecture and Archway's rendering, and kind of then working with some of the top companies in the world like Amazon, Flipkart, Samsung, and helping them, with their CG and 3D workflows and needs, and now transitioning into this new Web 3.0 world. Quite exciting to see the transition that Decor has made.
I mean, we're the same in that aspect, Karan, because we are just responding to the times, right? Changing times, really. The media is changing, how we consume and create content is changing, right? So we got to change with the times, and if we don't, that's that. So having said that, yes, I mean as a company we are going metaverse first in the next 6 7 years. We've started transition say around 5 to 6 months ago, and yeah, we're just trying to create an ecosystem with companies like yours to to actually provide, as they say, that India is going to create the metaverse, and we have to just make sure that they do, and people like you, companies like yours are
Yeah,
important, a very important part of that, really.
absolutely. I mean, we've already seen that, right, with kind of Web 2.0, and India is home to massive giants, both in VFX, animation, and even when it comes to other workflows, right, and IT as well, where definitely a hotspot. It'd be great to see India, continue its dominance as well when it comes to Web 3.0, and we've worked with over 150 companies right now to help them with their transition to real-time workflows.
Amazing, amazing. So let's just move on to our first panel. We are super excited to uh, have Avinash. Personally, we've been following his journey for 10, 12 years now. He's a legend in our ecosystem, um, and it's just been a pleasure to actually host him here. So if you can have Avinash here with us.
Avinash, some of his work in the early days through, like the blot days, almost that.
Yeah, I mean that The shows that the Blood guys used to put together were massive, massive, massive. So
Yeah, and
anyway,
then what he's done with Quicksand and now with Antriksh is just incredible, and doing a lot of this out of Goa, one of the most fun places in the world. It's a
absolutely,
creative hotspot, and it's great to see what he's done there.
here he is. I think.
Hey Avinash, thanks so much for joining us today. Welcome to 24 Hours of Chaos. Super excited about what you're going to be presenting today. I've been following your work for a long time.
Thank you, Karan. Thanks, Aman. Nice to meet you guys, and thanks for having me here and thinking our project worthy of such an amazing forum. So yeah, I'll just kind of get right into it. Just in the interest of time, I've put together a bunch of visuals and sounds from our project, and hopefully it'll be entertaining for people around the world to see what we're doing in India right now. So just really quickly, Antarik Studio is essentially a transmedia storytelling collective based out of India. And we focus on video games, performances, and media arts. And across all of these outcomes, a big focus for us is Indian culture and heritage. So uh, just kind of from a very top view, there are two projects that our studio is working on right now, which is taking up most of our time. They both built finally for being used inside and through a game engine. But of course, the way we're going about it is a bigger world that's finally coming into the game engine. And part of the talk today is also to focus on that. One project is called Antara, which is a historical colonial Indian adventure where music and dance is a big part of the gameplay. And elsewhere in India is a live performance as well as an interactive art project where we're trying to explore the future world of Antara itself. Both the projects are really trying to demonstrate our commitment to make games from India that amplify our multicultural heritage. And just a quick note to some people who've been supporting us along the way, we're currently supported by the EPIC Mega Grant program since 2021. And we're also supported by the British Council India UK Together Season of Culture that celebrates 75 years of Indian independence. Um, I think one of the things I'd like to say about the kind of vertical slice that we're working on, and I'll tell you more about the studio as we go along as well, which is called Antara, is that from several years now, I think our dream has been to create what one might call an independent AAA experiment. And here I'm just riffing off an iconic talk by Tamim Antonida from Ninja Theory. And this is a talk from GDC 2015 called an independent AAA experiment. And that really inspired me and our team to think about where we want to position ourselves. And I think the word independent is extremely important. Coming from India, where the gaming scene is obviously extremely influenced by investors, we felt like being independent is a very key aspect of what we're trying to do. And we've successfully managed to be independent for about 10 years now. It's our 10th year. And I wanted to therefore start with Jayalakshmi Ishwar, who's the other co-founder. She's also my mother. I've been very fortunate to be growing up in a family where Indian music and classical dance was a very important part. She's an accomplished dancer and author. The images on the right are 4 of her 6 books that she's written. And she basically came up with a story in 2010, which I was working on when I was a visual jockey. And that story somehow ended up becoming the start of a long video game adventure. And I think the point here is also to think about challenging the norms of video game authorship. I think this is a huge and important part of what's being spoken about globally. And I feel we're quite fortunate in India that we have so many points in Indian culture that one could work on. So what you see here is the original performance in 2010, which was a dance performance about aircrafts in Indian mythology, and the flyer on the right is something I'd made for my mom back then. And this kind of interest in connecting the dance of Bharatanatyam and Indian culture to science fiction, in some sense, was triggered our work in the project. So taking that as a cue and with a little bit of a seed grant from an organization called the HRC and the British Council in the UK, And with the majority of this process being self-funded, we've spent 4 years doing kind of a R&D slash prototyping. So this is Antarik Sanchar episode 0, as we called it back then.
Awesome.
Yes.
Tajanudim tajanudim tanatirana.
Basically, essentially, like I said, a 45-minute game. It was we were borrowing from back then, like games like Kentucky Route Zero, Machinarium were very popular. Like the point and click genre was coming back and was doing very successfully in the indie scene. So our idea here was to combine, I guess, a more traditional point and click experience, but in this kind of a floating 3D world where the cameras move around, go between first person, third person, and it's kind of like an art house, like an Indian Malgudi days science fiction kind of a thing with slow kind of movements and a lot of music and these kind of steampunk instruments and so on. I'm just going to play you a small video from what finally also became a new dance performance where we explored a more modern narrative. So this kind of clip shows you a clip from like the future, from a future Indian Mars mission, and where they find on Mars a small habitat that belongs to an Indian family. And that kind of kicks off this journey. And also important to mention, the person you see on the screen here is also inspired by he's the main protagonist, inspired by the great Indian mathematician Srinivasa Ramanujan. And the story of our character takes his kind of philosophy ahead.
In these troubling times, when countries and societies are fighting for the geopolitical conquest of Mars, the solar system, and the entire universe indeed, it is important to recount an alternative view of space travel, one that is but a pilgrimage through the beauty of the universe, carried forth with humility and wonder.
Some of these visuals then finally took us to Red Bull Music met us in 2018, and they helped us convert the video game that we built back into a dance performance with visuals from the game engine and from just other like motion graphic software that we were working on, and bring it all into a new show, which you see these pictures of, which again was super exciting because it kind of came back a full circle. And then from this story and what we did, we basically embarked on a totally different mission, which was to build a 2D game which was a totally radical departure from what we were trying. But this is a snippet from a 2D game working on mobile, again built on a game engine, and trying to create more like something like a learning tool where you can learn about. So in this case, you're playing with these two automatons. There, one is playing a Shruti box, one is playing, which is a sort of a drone instrument from India. And then you learn about musical theories, you learn about music. And also you get a chance to, create a rich environment, which, as you know, a lot of us who will be watching this talk would know, to create a detailed Indian environment in 3D is not a small feat, and it requires a whole lot of like different kinds of like inputs. And we felt at that point our theory was that maybe by going 2D we could overcome some of that and work with great 2D artists and bring that richness and flavor, which uh, like the same artifact, for example, what you see on screen might be a very, very different technical issue to kind of bring back into like a real-time 3D environment. So this was kind of an interesting journey. But again, once we did that, we also realized that our true love and my own passion and stuff is in the 3D world. I think I definitely felt like I like the immersion and I like the kind of like environment and the tools. And it was just super exciting where the industry was going as a whole. So we basically then hunkered back right in like the middle of the pandemic. Basically, we started work on Antara, which is a rhythmic adventure through a techno-spiritual colonial India. And it's a third-person dance action adventure game, and you're trying to essentially outwit the colonizers on these different spaces around this kind of fantasy India. And you're trying to unlock these flying machines, which in some sense is the kind of short form of what's going on. And in terms of the pillars of what we're building right now as a kind of a game, one pillar is obviously rich Indian culture and mythology. Some of the stuff you see here, like the elephant, for example, is an interesting one that's inspired by our research on Indian bronze sculptures from the 15th and 16th century, and then trying to imagine that what if moving automatons were built by those sculptors in the 15th century, what it would be like. So these are again this kind of science, what we're calling craft punk, basically, which is like our interpretation of steampunk for India. And the other visuals here as well show some of the work that's like in the game engine right now as we speak. The other pillar is that, again, going with the idea of like a non-violent game coming out of India and also trying to explore different kinds of like exciting mechanics and so on. We felt like a stealth adventure format would be a good format to go with. So the idea here is that you're a mother and son, you're walking through these different places, exploring heritage, and then you're working with the communities to create this kind of stealth experience in order to unlock what you need to. And finally, dance action and also music action is a big part of our game, and we're trying to see how traditional Indian motion capture can be used as a mechanic, because as some of you know, Indian dance is a very deep vocabulary in itself. It's a language in itself. So the idea is to see how we can convert that language, and also the language of classical Carnatic music, instruments, music theory, take all of that and convert it into let's say if Uncharted Lost Legacy was a musical adventure game. In some sense, it's trying to like find that. And in terms of positioning, it's interesting because I never actually tried to, all this while in this journey, I never really cared too much about what kind of game are we trying to build. I felt like it wasn't so important for me. But in recent times, as we try to explain what we're doing, we felt like trying to position ourselves is useful for gamers to understand. So in some sense, we are, looking at some elements of Uncharted Lost Legacy in terms of, combination of adventure and culture, some of the non-combat stealth mechanics that might be there in Beyond Good and Evil, definitely the music action and the dance action of Bound and Guitar Hero. So somewhere in the middle of all of this is hopefully like a sweet spot for us. One thing I just wanted to add was that we have a great interest in including non-traditional creators. I think being in India, we have access to and also a responsibility more than the access to include people like Rajiv, who's shown here, who's a painter, a street painter, and these are concept cards that he's painted for us, about 20 of them. And there are many, many examples like this. And what we're trying to, I guess, theorize on as a theory of our work and is this idea around a circular design for Indian video games. And when I mean circular, for example, what you see on screen is, sorry, his head's being blocked maybe, but the idea here is to show how you can create a digital fair trade provocation, or let's say an ethical photogrammetry pipeline where creators like a sculptor can be included in the whole process instead of just shooting like places you find and so on. Growing up in India, we know how rich everything is. We know that inside any shop in a small marketplace, there can be some magic happening. There can be some unbelievable character sitting on the street, who you think is an insignificant person, but that person can be like the most amazing person in the way they look, in the way they talk, right? So I think, but this is also the challenge, right? Being an Indian, India, So how do you make it on an indie budget, right? How do you make a AAA India on an indie budget?
Sure.
So, and also as a fundraising tactic, I mean, I know that we need to start selling our own things to make money for the project where we are. So, I mean, this is the unfortunate decision, but I think it's a good one. So we're hopefully by the time our vertical slice gets around, we'll be launching our digital heritage storefront on the various marketplaces with about 100 objects.
Awesome.
We kind of definitely exploring photogrammetry in a big way. This is just from a slightly semi-automated museum setup with a turntable and fairly not unprofessional, but less professional, let's say. We view photogrammetry as much as a research tool, as much as much as a production tool. I mean, there's obviously an aspect of heritage conservation, cultural conservation, preservation, creating assets for other people to research. I mean, all of this stuff is where we're also interested in. So that hopefully gives you some sense of the work we're doing. And then coming on to like, obviously some of the character work I wanted to share is also trying to make use of the current technology in kind of next gen character creation. One of the challenges and the huge challenges with Indian garments and costumes is obviously that Indian costumes are super complicated to make. For example, if you look at this, which is a Bharatanatyam costume, while the challenge of animating this in a non-real-time environment would be high, the challenges of making this a real-time cloth, which pleats, let's say in this case, as a costume, where the pleats open up and shut, and many other forms of like draping in Indian garments occur. It requires a very, very complicated workflow in some sense beyond the scope of our current team, but we're just about going to make it manage. And we've figured out a lot of hacks, a lot of things along the way, working between softwares like Maya, 3D Studio Max, Unreal Engine, and Houdini to figure out a kind of a combined workflow to create garments which are kind of more true to the Indian way of dressing. And also, again, going back to just costumes, just Indian garments, Indian ways of wearing shirts, Indian ways of tying certain garments. This is the level at which we're trying to work, and we believe this kind of work and research is extremely important if an Indian game has to be on the Indian global AAA market. We feel like these are the kind of details that will help us be authentic. Also exploring a lot of mythological animals, quadrupeds. Again, more challenges for the team, but super exciting nevertheless. And in terms of this is what the characters look like. So this is Ramanujan. So this is a custom character using some of the new pipelines going between Maya and Unreal Engine. We've not yet. We're still working on like the custom hair especially for the dancer. Again, super complicated. Anyone out there wants to work with us or help, please do write to us. And this is the mother, and again, it's just extremely exciting to see people around us in this resolution. This is the the player controller that we're working on. Again, very complicated just to get like a complex player controller. You can see the cloth is still tearing on the boy's legs and so on. But still a long way from where we started. And this is now in-game character controllers. We have a character swapping mechanic where you can be the boy and you can be the mother. And then together you can solve some puzzles. And this is the more recent one where we're working with Houdini. And this is essentially working between Houdini and the game engine. And looking at real-time cloth sim.
Yeah.
As well as, like cloth grading, like size variations for all the NPCs. All of that stuff we're trying to drive from Houdini so that as a smaller team, we can work in a much more efficient manner. And this is some of the work that's going on right now, which could be interesting for you to look at just this is literally like yesterday, day before. Just to give you where our character's going, the quality we're going for. And obviously all of this has to make its way back into the game engine from here. In terms of just like, I think an important part here is also that while we're working on digital humans, a big part of it is how do you link digital humans back to humanity? So a big part of our talent ecosystem is working with grassroots musicians, dancers, dance students. So this is a little bit of the mocap stuff going on. This is on a body rig that was still in the early clunky meta-human days. So it's kind of all over the place a bit, but you can see a bit of what we're trying to do, which is working with and trying to capture the dance expressions on the bottom left, uh, and the mocap on the right. And also, it's been interesting working through the pandemic, working on Skype, Bangalore sessions, mocap, dancer sitting in Delhi, me sitting in Goa. It's like this insane trying to work like this. And also trying to work on like Houdini to clean up again. As a small team, we don't have the luxuries of a bigger team to do finger mocap corrections, body mocap corrections. Trying to work on an automated batch processing kind of a possibility of working between Xsense and Houdini and Unreal Engine to help us out a little bit along the way. And then, yeah, this is some of what this is like real time using faceware. And again, this is not calibrated. It's literally a first test. But the bottom left is interesting because that's basically that's a Skype call going on with my mother, and we're just taking the Skype call and going directly into faceware and then into the game engine.
This is crazy.
Yeah, so it's not corrected. That's why, I mean, obviously for the professionals looking at this, they will be horrified looking at this just in the quality of the facial mocap. But in all fairness, we're still tinkering around. Is this like literally in process work that I wanted to share? But again, there's just so much. There are so many parts of this pipeline. You just got to do what you can, along the way. And finally, for the sound design and production, we've taken the effort to really work like a AAA studio. One of the beautiful talks in GDC is the music of Doom, I think, and just like an insane work process. And we've tried to bring that same rigor to the music, because we also noticed that in India, especially, music often takes a backseat. It's the last thing that you just get done in a hurry. And for us, it's a very core important part of creating the mood, creating the experience, and working with real musicians. We worked with about 40 plus instrumentalists in South India right now for this project. And finally, just to give you a quick sense of how some of it is coming together, this is just one of the maybe scenes that's not the most current scene, which I'm not able to share right away, but maybe from a couple of months back, just giving you a sense of how. And of course, this is not our character. This is the character Echo, which is just a more smooth character back then before we figured out a player controller. You can see some of the soldiers. We've been programming some of the simple AI and all of that stuff right now, looking at some of the stealth mechanisms. And then kind of like, essentially this is like a marketplace that you're exploring. And this is like a simple game kind of a, this keynote is awful for playing videos. Yeah. Now it won't play. But yeah, basically this is like some of the world. This is like a small puzzle where you have to collect like sound particles that are coming from the top, and there's this machine that plays all these Indian classical instruments like a mridangam on the left. It's kind of like essentially a automaton kind of sculpture. And then yeah, this is another one of the scenes that we're working on. Let me just play it on. I don't know why it's not playing properly. So this is one of the scenes that we're working on. Again, this is not final by any stretch, but it gives you a sense of the kind of world we're trying to build. A lot of stuff has to come in. It's all like just prototype level things. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like what I had to share. Maybe I'm going to pause here in the interest of time as well. I'm not sure how much time we've taken up, but hopefully that gives you some kind of an idea around what our project's about.
Such a cool project. I mean, it's great to see all the amazing work that you and your team are doing.
Thank you.
We've got some questions that are very interesting. The first one is from Akshat Parmar. And Akshat's question is about, he's asking about the challenges you faced while designing the assets and the environments, and also what were your inspirations for that?
Great. Thanks for having me here, guys. And thanks, Akshat. So the challenges while designing the assets, I think one of the main challenges is just that, India is such a rich country in terms of its culture and kind of cultural diversity. And when you embark on a project where you're trying to capture that, one of the clear challenges is how do you, create a game in which you have that kind of level of detail. Because often when you see games, for example, like even if you look at games that are made around the topic of India, like say Uncharted, Lost Legacy, Tomb Raider, so on and so forth, when you look more closely, you'll see there's a lot of shortcuts. Obviously, all games need to take shortcuts. But if you're in India making a game on India, then you kind of feel the pressure and the responsibility of trying to not take those shortcuts, which is obviously a big trap, so to speak. And therefore, the challenge really is, how do you get the right pipeline in a way that you can do justice to the richness we see around us? And the other big challenge I've really faced, especially being an indie developer, working without investors, working without a publisher in India, is that there's unfortunately not a lot of uh, credibility and confidence that Indian game developers have on indie developers in India, especially indie game. I mean, game talent in India doesn't have so much confidence in someone like myself, who's on a mission to create something on our own, and that leads to to a peculiar situation where even though we might be making and having a quality benchmark like we want to have, it's very hard to actually get talent to come and work and invest time in a project like this because they would rather be working on Batman or Assassin's Creed or something. So I think that's one of the big challenges. And I think in terms of just my inspiration for this, for second part of the question, is just really, I mean, like, it starts a lot with my own family. My mother, who's a dancer, who wrote the story, growing up with Indian culture, and as well as my background in design and research, and trying to like look at game design as a system and not just trying to tell a story, but trying to change the industry. So that's my inspiration. I want to change the industry.
That's great. We've got one more, and it's about your approach to the music that you've composed and selected for your experiences. What's the story behind that? What's the inspiration, and yeah, what's kind of led you to the selections you've made?
Sure. So the music is an interesting piece here, just because it's already hard. It was always hardwired into the DNA of like Indian classical music, Indian classical dance were a part of the project. So from the beginning, in fact, a lot of the game design and the levels, the puzzles are based on Indian classical instruments. The robots and the automatons we've developed are science fiction versions of Indian classical instruments. So music is really in the DNA of the project. And also, we had a very long and deep collaboration with our music producer Murtovich, who's kind of a legend on the Hyderabad electronic music scene, and him and me go back a long way doing DJing and DJing in the scene. So just having someone like that right in the heart of the project, who also wants to interpret, essentially looking at an electroclassical genre of music, which I guess it just goes from the people you have, and the rest of it is just trying to do the best we can towards representing our diverse Indian cultural music heritage.
Fantastic stuff. Thanks so much for joining us today, Avinash. I think yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on here. And really
Cheers.
looking forward to seeing what comes out of Antriksh and elsewhere.
Thank you. Thank you so much, and have a great conference.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
All right, that was fun. What a way to represent India, especially when it comes to games. Great stuff from Avinash and team. So we've got someone very exciting for the next panel.
Absolutely,
We
sir.
have.
One legend
Want to go
gone,
ahead
one
and
legend is
introduce him?
coming in. Um, well, let's just let him introduce himself.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yep. Let's do it.
I mean, we all know who you are in the Indian ecosystem and environment. But for our global audience, I'll let you introduce yourself.
All right. Hi, I'm Sameer Pitalwalla. I currently lead games for Google Cloud for Asia Pacific. And prior to this, I was the territory head for Epic Games for Southeast Asia and South Asia. And yeah, I've been around this space in some terms of actually engaging with for the last 5 to 6 years, but grew up in the world of 3D in many ways. I used to review computer games for Digit, Score, Computer Gaming World, newspapers back when in my teenage years, and also was amongst the top three Quake 3 players in India. Although I think everybody will debate whether I was amongst the top three from the team, which from the folks who are actually among the top. So it's so yeah, so that's a short bio.
That's awesome. Thanks for joining us today, Sameer. So yeah, I think you talked a little bit about, your experience with gaming in the past. But yeah, I'm just curious as to like what, initially drew you towards games and computer graphics. Like where did that start? And you know, it's great that you've pursued that and you're now at Google and leading cloud gaming there for this region. But yeah, just a little, about the history and kind of what that was like in the early days as well for you.
Yeah, actually, I think it kind of I've had it started in the early years with just an interest in computers, and trying to figure out which directory and under command prompt was Prince of Persia hidden under, right? And in school, that's what you'd end up doing. And that kind of remained with me for a long time. It's pretty much started with the PC. I didn't really, grow up in a family where we had sort of like consoles and socks at that point of time. I did have a 8-bit, but that was pretty much it. And in many ways, then not much happened in that world. I continued with PC until I met my friend Karan Doshi. He was the guy who kind of introduced me to PC gaming in terms of the years of 2000 and 2001. But more importantly, actually introduced me to online forums like Kawabonga and others. And that's really where I realized that, in those early years, most people didn't really have PCs. So I was lucky I had Pentium 386. And, at that point of time, I kind of reached these forums where I found these really cool folks from across India, from Chennai, from Delhi, from Bombay. And it was this forum in many ways was actually incubated by a company which was trying to build a game, but was trying to find a way to that they could attract talent. The same problem we have today as well. And they started the forum as a way to get people to play test the game, but also to hopefully recruit people who are game designers and creators. And over there, it really began to kind of become far wider than just gaming. It was more actually in detail about building your own PCs, finding out, truly in terms of understanding how you actually, engage with the hardware. And that kind of grew into, me kind of building out a career as a game reviewer. But more also importantly, I spent a lot of time reviewing hardware, spending those years reviewing CD-ROMs, DVD-ROM drives, to GPUs, to things like FSB speeds and in motherboards. So it was like hardcore training, and it all happened because of, in many ways, the community that was on that forum. Which, although it came through gaming, it kind of broadened into the world of hardware because everything was interlinked, right? You always were trying to find out ways to squeeze more FPSs out of your hard rig.
Sure.
And and the community was small back then. You could pretty much, I think it was not more than 1,200 people in India.
Got it. No, I think that's really interesting, and I mean, we've kind of gone from, where it was more of a subculture in India, right? The early days where you mentioned that, you'd even be talking to people in other cities, and it was kind of a world where, everyone knew everyone to some extent. And I think especially in the last couple of years, right, with kind of a boom in, mobile gaming and just accessibility being much higher, with obviously games like, PUBG that have done extremely well in India. I mean, what do you see as the next frontier, right? Specifically because currently we're kind of at the point where we're leveraging, mobile hardware, right? And we know that provides a very limited gaming experience, even in terms of what we've seen in the past, in terms of what consoles and PCs can deliver. But how do you think, some of the upcoming breakthroughs in, cloud rendering and that type of technology, what kind of shift do you see it having here specifically in this region as well? And how far are we from, kind of seeing another breakout title like PUBG, but that leverages, higher fidelity gaming or something of that sort?
I mean, we've already had seeds of that answer sowed in that question, since it's fairly clear to see that with Diwali, 5G will launch by that time. I think what 4G did to video, 5G will do to games in many ways, because it will allow a democratization of high fidelity games for mobile audiences, predominantly through cloud streaming. The costs are prohibitive, but those will come down, as is the natural order of things with Moore's law. And secondly, the fact is that beyond just the ability to have console level AAA gaming or high end PC level AAA gaming, no longer being reliant on a bottleneck with the mobile hardware piece. The second piece, which I feel will also kind of change dramatically, is sort of the whole angle of creation, right? Today, consumption will grow, but so will creation. So I don't think we're very far. I think, I mean, in many ways, this is something which, from a timing perspective, there's just so much of infrastructure which is now ready, where I feel, in India, in many ways, will leapfrog. And this sort of real-time game engine community is a lot like those game communities back then in the early 2000s, right? Where everybody knows each other right now. But I think when you look back 5 years from now, the industry would have grown so massively in terms of sheer number of people, participants, as well as specializations of companies, that we look back as this being the simplest era of our times.
Sure.
Interesting.
Sure.
On that note, I want your commentary on the job and upskilling opportunities in the space, really, because that's what we've been known for, right? Not necessarily, service industry is huge. There have been fewer product-based companies and products and IPs that have come out. It started to happen, but we're still predominantly a service-heavy sector. Uh, do you see any change going about in the coming time?
Yeah, I think it's inevitable. Most economies start with copying others or then trying to deliver services to others and then eventually build into a product economy. It happened with, the last 15 years, I think maybe 15 odd years has been, really revelatory in terms of the Indian product ecosystem coming to, in many ways, life, right? Since 2010, you've had probably, I think now there's some 60 unicorns. But if you look at it, the seeds of these companies were sowed in services firms, because the people who ended up getting into product companies came from services firms, where they had been there, done that, or either a part of the BPO firm. I mean, Flipkart is an excellent example, right? Both Vinny and Sachin, in many ways, who are actually working for an outpost of Amazon over here before they decided to go ahead and build a consumer-facing product in the form of Flipkart. And we're seeing that happen in gaming as well. More and more people, whether they are the Ubisofts or the Rockstar Games or the Zynga, is an excellent example of a company which has, through its setup over here, actually been a nursery for many of the gaming companies, whether it is Bombay Play or Play Simple or even Moonfrog. All of those have really come out of the core work that, in terms of the setup that Zynga had during the late to mid 2000s. So I see similarly, it's a similar pattern what happened in gaming, but also what happened in the form of the IT services industry. It's inevitable that it will happen in our world as well.
Got it. No, that's a great thought, right? Yeah. So you did mention game engines in the past, right? And how there is, a growing community there as well, with game developers here in India. But in parallel, we're seeing another very different breakthrough, right, in the world of computer graphics in terms of what, tools like Google's own Imagine, and then like what we're seeing with DALL-E and Midjourney, where AI is, starting to make some really solid contributions, especially in terms of user-generated content now, right, to this ecosystem. And I mean, I personally don't think we're too far away from, a point where we'll see something like, Imagine or DALL-E knocking out animated content as well. But when it comes, yeah, like, would love to hear your thoughts on that, and how it could disrupt, gaming, as well as, many other factors. Like, I think you've also had a lot of experience with, video as a format and kind of the birth of that format in India in terms of, YouTube and how that propagated. So, and I think like one of the unique things is when you give that power to, creators, right? The common person, where they don't need high-end equipment to create something. So would love to hear your thoughts on, how you think those types of tools will cause disruptions.
So that's a great question. And if a couple of data points, when you look at sort of game development, 60 to 70% of the cost is estimated of game development to just go into asset creation. So that's point number one. Point number two is asset creation is hard to do. The tools are a learning curve, which is not very democratized. Three, tools like Imagine, DALI 2, OpenAI, and Midjourney are doing great work for 2D images, but you're already seeing folks who are at the edge of asset creation using these tools to fill in the gaps, such as textures, right? You're using the people are using this as plugins to do texturing around the 3D assets. And fourth, if you look at the work that's happening in Nerf, you're already seeing 3D assets being created out of thin air. So it would be logical to think that what uh, Nerf can do today with 3D asset creation can also be paired with what generative media is doing, where you can actually create 3D assets that don't exist, as opposed to training 3D assets right now being created out of, say, wild capture on real video, which is what you take the keyframes and do it, as opposed to now being able to generate those images and create a mesh around it. Totally generative, right? So the whole pipeline will end eventually going up generatively. That said, the fact is that a lot of these assets are not currently usable in traditional game pipelines. There is a lot of, but the fact is that you can create them. But maybe Unreal Engine 6 will have Nerf support, right? Who knows? But it seems like that is the directional way it will go to, which in many ways completely changes the idea of what it means to be a 3D artist.
Sure.
Now you don't really need to know the tool. So you don't really need to even have an imagination to be able to sculpt it or to create the asset. You can merely, on a text prompt, at least be able to, generate assets out of thin air. So I think that's going to be truly transformational. And if you think about it, the world of the metaverse, which is my sixth and final point, which is that, the world of video would not have happened without UGC and what YouTube created as tools. And in many ways, those tools for video became democratized because of both the way the editing suite changed and non-linear editing became accessible to anybody on a phone or a regular, device. And secondly, capture tools became very democratized as well, right? The camera came in everybody's hand. This, I think, will be similar sort of animal spirits for the media will be, will be unleashed, because what happened with video will happen to both games, but also to the larger world of 3D. And that's happened. And these five components I spoke to, along with the looking at the sixth one, which is essentially the way video ended up becoming, user generated. These four to five will end up allowing 3D to become user generated as well, but aided by machine and generative media.
Got it. Got it. And that's great. No, that's very insightful. And yeah, I kind of, we've seen that in your journey also with, Culture Machine, where YouTube in its very nascent stages, right? When you started off with Culture Machine, but really to build a thriving community and, to see so much user-generated content. And yeah, I think, there are certain factors like you mentioned, right? Like 4G coming in and, just kind of lifting, the lid off of this and letting the masses really start to consume this kind of content. And even from a content creation standpoint, yeah, so I'm really excited to see, what we'll do here in India once we have, access to that next frontier, and, whether it's creating the next generation of games or content for the metaverse. I think it's going to be a really exciting space. So to that effect, can you shed some light on some of Google's efforts specifically around this, and also in this region, like what can we here expect, in the next couple of years in terms of tools that may be more accessible to the masses?
So I think, if you look at sort of, I can give you a view from the cloud perspective. I mean, obviously,
sure, yeah, that'd be helpful.
Places for the gaming community to being around over here, and it's going to continue to find ways that you can engage with that community in different ways outside of video. But if you look at cloud itself, it's really about the ability to provide these tools to companies. And in the larger world of 3D, gaming is one kind of application, as I'm sure you already know. Aman does a whole bunch of work in architecture. You do a bunch of work across various segments, right from geo to say simulations. So in that sense, what we are seeing at least is the consumer form of applications over here, which are games. You are increasingly seeing founders and businesses investing heavily in building AA and AAA quality games in India. And that married with sort of, a lot of these come from a background where they have built casual and hyper casual communities around real money. So in many ways, they naturally look at it as saying that, okay, real money is fiat, and how do you actually kind of build these economies out where you can have unlock fandom and unlock engagement. And Web3 becomes an obvious component to use, at least to design these economies. So you're seeing folks who come from the real money gaming world who are building AA, AAA quality games now, but are also finding a way that they can take inspiration from their own journey in real money gaming and marrying it with Web3 economics. So it's kind of created a really interesting talent pool, right? Where I think people still struggle, as we all know, to hire high quality 3D talent. But there's plenty of good talent when it comes to designing these Web3 economies out. And there's an aspiration to work with global talent today who can help them build these applications. So what we are doing at Google is finding ways that we can enable these Web3 economies using a lot of what GCP brings to the table, right from node scalings to finding a way that we can have high quality security. And second is on the 3D aspect. A lot of these things we're talking about nerf as well as generative media. Google has in many ways contributed publicly to large amounts of pioneering research in that space. And some of that is what we're bringing to work with certain key clients in terms of finding a way that we can bring a lot of this cool tech, which is at the edges of what's possible in that world of 3D, and bring it to companies like our folks over here. So it's true, both on the crypto side of it and more on the blockchain side of it, and also on the generative media side of it.
Great. So, Samir, are there any shout outs you'd like to, give to any sort of studios or games that have really impressed you, specifically something coming out of this region, this time zone?
I mean, I'm a big fan of the work you guys both do, right? Both Decor as well as Green Brain. I think in many ways, you're at the center of the community and have been able to put joint dots together. And as leaders in the space, I think it's been heartening to see how you have been able to, in this event for that matter. And other than that, I think there are plenty of folks. I think all the great work the team at Arvind and team are doing at Epic. I think those folks have in many ways seen that journey right from Unity to now Unreal. But yeah, I think it's a limited set of folks who are doing really good work. And I think you both are definitely at the center of it. So thank you for setting this up and inviting me, and also doing this event and taking out your time to help push this industry forward.
Yeah, our pleasure to have you here, Samir. Do you have any closing thoughts, notes, anything before you sign off?
I think the world of 3D sometimes gets bottled into, for folks on the outside, into the world of gaming. And gaming is just one aspect of the larger world of cool stuff that you can do in 3D and simulation in general. I think our whole world is in many ways simulated between our 2 years. And, this world of what's coming forward will be computationally an order of magnitude higher than what we have seen so far, but it will also be far more engaging and far more visceral. So I think I'm looking forward to finding a way to be a part of this ecosystem. And I think it's the exciting times are far ahead, and it's just getting started.
I'm into that.
Cool,
Super.
guys. Thanks
Thanks.
for doing this, and yeah, we should be.
Thanks.
Thank you. Well, that was something from Samir, and we really wanted to have him again for a while on the show, because he's always had this macro level of point of views that you don't really generally bump into people that might have. That being said, let's move on to our next panel here, and we've got a bunch of some great people lined up, and we're going to be strolling really quick through them. And first of them is Saurabh from Liminal. He's been doing some crazy stuff. Also, guys, he's somebody who's not coming from a 3D world. He was an engineer who is now in 3D world. It's going to be interesting what he's been doing. So let's have Saurabh here with us. Thank you so much for joining in. Welcome to 24 Hours of Chaos. There's a lot of good stuff coming out of Bombay, and we have a lot of, of course, previous panels also from Bombay, including a host. So let's start. I'll let a friend ask a friend a few questions. Then please go ahead.
Hi, Aman. Hi,
Yeah.
Karan.
Sure. Hey, Saurabh, thanks so much for joining us today at 24 Hours of Chaos.
Hey, thanks for bringing me here, man.
Yeah. And, I think one of the very interesting things about your background is that you started out with live action filmmaking and you've made, a full transition into CG workflows where you heavily leverage, XR and related technologies as well for a lot of your projects. Just in general, I think it would be great for the audience to understand your background and how you've kind of transitioned from live action filmmaking into deeper CG workflows that you're using across a number of different mediums.
Sure. I think when I started Liminal around 6.5 years ago, the idea was to sort of combine storytelling and technology together. And it so happened that I picked up the DSLR camera much early when I was, just before college. So I was experimenting around with photography and video and so on. And I happened to be an engineer. So I also had the technology background. So I wanted to mix them both together. And that's what I did with housing.com before Liminal. So I was working with them as an imagery scientist. And that's where, we started fiddling with AR, VR, and 3D and all of these imaging technologies. And then when I started Liminal, the idea was to tell stories through technology. And one of the things that, because I was so close to the camera and something that was I was in a very comfortable space there. So we started off with a cinematic VR content development. And it was pretty interesting back then because we had to make our own rigs. This was GoPros. And, I remember the first rig that we made was built out of a wooden panel, and we designed it on our own. And then we started shooting, in VR, and we had to literally redevelop the grammar of filming. And obviously there were people, creating these films in LA, in Canada, and we're trying to together sort of push this medium as a filmmaking medium, as a cinematic medium that can be used to tell stories.
Right. Yeah, it's like the best of both worlds, right? Especially when it comes to VP, because so much of the technology has roots in XR, right? I mean, camera tracking, so many things in general. Even motion capture is, heavily, it's oftentimes the same sensors or imaging techniques that we'd use. So I think it's that fun overlap where you can seamlessly transition between real worlds and virtual worlds, and I think that to me is very fascinating as well. So Saurabh, can you talk a little about some of the more recent projects you and Liminal have been doing, especially in the XR space, and a lot of those projects revolve around marketing engagements, and it'd be kind of interesting to understand how these workflows help shift the needle for even something like sales in a marketing pipeline.
Right. So I think most recently we've also been doing virtual production a lot. And obviously, since we started off as an XR company, now there's another vertical within Liminal where we cater to a lot of clients for marketing engagement or let's say events. So recently, I think some of the highlight projects that we've worked on is for Airtel, for Citibank, and one was for Shivas. And what we could see is these are all XR projects where for Citi, let's say we built like So for Citi, we built like a AR experience, which was at Cirque du Soleil. And what we noticed that, a lot of people would come to that stall and, experience augmented reality. It was a fun little game that we built. And through that, Citi was trying to get the customer data and make them fill up a form. And we ended up, in a month's time, we ended up having around 4,000 entries just by, people visiting the stall. and these 4,000 entries were for HNIs who the city was targeting for City Gold account. So I would say customer engagement, once you go deeper into once you involve your customer a little bit deeper into the engagement, I think it really creates that impact on them, and then they listen to your brand a little bit more. They pay more attention because they are themselves engaging. It's more of an active experience that they're experiencing, and that makes a lot of difference. On the other hand, I would say we did a project with Shivas where it was an AR experience. We deployed it around all major airports across the world, from Europe to Middle East, Southeast Asia, and so on. The idea was to sort of scan a Shivas bottle and you'd get a AR experience, and this was all on web. So because we couldn't make an app and distribute it, it was a big challenge to sort of make people download the app on the fly when they're into transit. And what we saw, there were around 340,000 hits in less than 30 days across these airports, and we saw a pattern of people, experiencing it in Berlin and then flying down to LA and then showing their friends, because some of these experiences were outside the airport. So definitely that made us realize that once they see some this kind of an experience which is engaging, they want to show it to their friends, they want to show it to their family, and engage with it, and so word of mouth becomes another tool which you have not thought about while you're designing the campaign, but it's like a byproduct of what you're doing. So it's really interesting to see how using XR, and once you sort of engage your customers that way, the kind of results that comes in, it's quite fascinating that way.
Got it. That's great. So I think, yeah, just going back to one of the things you said, right? Like, I mean, earlier, kind of getting folks to download an app is, typically painful, right? And if you're doing it at, location-based entertainment or installations, that makes it much easier. But I also, I've seen some really neat work you guys have been doing in kind of browser-based 3D experiences as well, right? Leveraging CG. And yeah, would be great to kind of, hear your philosophy on that. There are obviously two schools of thought right now. One is a little more about, rendering in the cloud, right? And pixel streaming down to lower end devices. But then there's also that other approach where you use lighter frameworks that can run natively in a browser. So it would be great to kind of understand, the way you see things and what is going to work better near term, and then, in the future as well beyond that.
I think in the near term, definitely. Sorry, got a phone call. I think we've been working on 3JS and web-based technology a lot more than pixel streaming right now, only because the kind of experiences that we are building, or that you can build on pixel streaming, won't be mobile friendly. So one of the reasons that is limiting that, also the kind of bandwidth that you need with 5G, I think it'll be better. But currently, I think we are not in that space, at least in India, or the kind of projects that we are working on, so that we can go full-fledged pixel streaming. So that's why we've been working a lot on web-based applications. With XR, WebXR, I think it's a great tool. One, you don't have to download an app. Two, it's mobile friendly, so it's device agnostic. Basically, if you have a browser, it works. In near term, definitely, I think web-based XR is something that people will be exploring more. But in the future, I don't know. I mean, there's a limit to how much you can push the web and the browser, because it's not connected to your, the way the browser speaks to your device. It's very different from, it is a browser. It's a layer on, it's an application on top of your OS. So I don't know if I think in the future, pixel streaming would definitely pick up, or we would have to look into that that way. But for now, I think WebXR is something that at least for the next 4 to 5 years, is something that I think WebXR will be something we have to rely on. And that's one of the reasons why we are pushing WebXR right now as well, because for us, especially with AR applications, it becomes much easier because we can just develop the experience on web and push it through WhatsApp or Facebook or whatever. And then, it's easier for the consumer to sort of experience it. They don't need a specific app or a high-end device or a very, efficient Wi-Fi to be able to experience that.
That makes sense. In fact, a lot of e-commerce companies, in India as well, are kind of leveraging. It's just super easy, man. A small use case, but a very valid one. If I'm out there to actually buy a piece of furniture, if you can show me real time how it fits, and if it fits at all, it's a lot of no returns. For a
Correct.
company, a lot of logistics and the money saved.
And also, the thing is, there are ways to sort of push these 3D models so that you can, make it really, really light and something that any phone can support it. So that way, it's much, much more efficient that way.
Correct.
With pixel streaming, whatever experience that we have had in the past, you would require that kind of bandwidth. Or even though 3D models then becomes a little heavier because the expectation increases. Now, because you're doing pixel streaming, you won't just do a lightweight 3D model. You have to add more things to it. So, so that way, WebXR makes a lot of sense right now.
Closing remarks, sir, from Karan and Saurabh.
Hey, thanks for calling me here, and it was great to speak to you guys.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank you so much. All right, Saurabh. Well.
Great stuff, Saurabh. So just want to pick out some questions from the audience here as well. We've got a very interesting one about your view on game creators in the future. And it's got some additional conditions, this question, right? So it basically talks about what's happened with, democratization of content, specifically with, video as a format. And we've seen, with platforms like YouTube, you've got easy entry to something like that. So the question is, what would you see happening in the future when it comes to gaming and game creators when
I think
those tools get more democratized? Yes.
I think democratization of anything has its own pros and cons. I think if you see the videos right now, like the example that you took with YouTube, I think on one side where you can see loads and loads of content coming on the platform, it might not be of the kind of production quality or the scale that you would want to look at, but at the same time it gives the opportunity to the creators to sort of create and capitalize on their content. Similarly, on the game front, also, I think even if it is democratizing in the way that um, in the future, I think it will be good for the creators because once you start building and pushing the games, you will learn a lot in that space and eventually develop much better games than just not doing it. And on the other side, uh, there are people who would be who are creating AAA rated games. They will get much better at it, and I think in the future, more and more people who come on the platform and create more games, I think it'll be good for the community and for the developers too.
Absolutely. I think that's a great point of view on that, and I think it's true. I mean, yeah, just things are going to get democratized in general, right? And like you said, it's the pros and cons, of course. But in general, I do see it more as a pro because, like, at this point, I think especially when it comes to something like gaming, I think the barrier to entry will never be as low or easy as just switching on a camera and shooting video. It's definitely going to be more complex, and at minimum there are always key design decisions to make. um, and yeah, I don't see. I think it's great that we have game engines around for that reason. Anyway, it's really the democratization started with that, right? And I think we're looking at even simpler forms with things like Roblox and beyond. I'm really excited to see where this goes.
Absolutely.
Well. Thank you so much, Saurabh, and we look
Thanks for
forward
having me here,
to.
guys. Have a good show.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon.
Sure.
So I think before we let Saurabh go, I think just one more question for Saurabh. Um, Sorry, I
Yeah,
think this one
sure.
just came in. Yeah,
No
just
worries.
take one more. Yeah, this one just came in. Yeah, sort of. I mean, in terms of XR specifically, um, what are you super excited about? I mean, for me, I think 5G opens up a lot of possibilities to start
Yeah.
streaming down to devices. How do you think something like that is going to disrupt how XR experiences are consumed, and also from a hardware standpoint, once that happens, what could we be looking at?
So I think two things. One is the hardware that we are dependent on to experience XR. Once we move on to wearables, things are going to change drastically. And the second is the bandwidth that can support, hyper realistic 3D models, photorealistic spaces, and renders. So I think both of these, I'm excited about the 5G tech coming in, and in fact, we're working on a couple of projects using the 5G tech and exploring the potential of what can be done in the XR space using the 5G technologies. But I think it has to be a mix of both accessibility as well as the way we can render these graphics on the wearables. So I think it's pretty exciting that it's just starting up. I think we have been waiting since last 6 years for all of this to come to the stage, and then I think it's just starting up, and it's going to be a great future, I think.
Thanks, Saurabh. Yeah, great to hear your perspective on that. Thanks again for joining us today.
All right. All right. On to our next panel here. Um, we have Rutul Patel, and Karan, you've been friends with Rutul for a while, and I'll let
Yes,
you
absolutely. Yeah,
go
looking
at
forward
it.
to Rutul's take on fashion
All right.
and computer graphics. Yeah, I think she's got a very interesting perspective and a strong background in 3D, and taking those 3D skills and pairing that with her interest in fashion. So
Correct.
excited to hear what she's going to say today. And she's also here in Mumbai as well.
Let's see
Yeah.
what's up.
That was an amazing showreel. And we have Rutul Patel, who's leading up Digital Districts India division, here with us today. Thanks so much for joining us today, Rutul. And it's a pleasure to have you here. You're obviously a veteran in the CGs and VFX space, and you're also diving much deeper into meta fashion. And Aman and I are really looking forward to hearing more about your journey and what you're currently doing with meta fashion. So it would be great if you could just introduce yourself to the global audience as well.
So thank you for having me. Okay. So I have been an art student from my childhood. I went to fine art school, which is very traditional. We were given a piece of paper and never to ever touch computer until we reach the final semester, final year. And like everything was traditional. That was back in 2000. And by the time it was 2003, Photoshop and all the other basic software started getting introduced in India, after which I actually was really keen on exploring that space. So I decided to go to US and pursue my art direction in film school. Uh, Actually design school, it's Academy of Arts, and they there are much more open to all the softwares. So there I learned multiple softwares, like okay, what is Nuke, what is Maya, what is different editing softwares and things like that. Then my hobby, like since my background has been art, I naturally tilted towards matte painting, which is a combination of art direction and concept art. And from there, when I came back to India, there was no such matte painting department in any VFX studio, including rhythm and hues. So I joined as a texture painter with a full intention of converting one of the department into a matte painting department. And that's where, like, when this fashion thing came in, I started seeing all the maps, and all those texture painting maps started coming in my mind that, oh my God, this is like, my calling. Because during my master, I took an elective, which was fashion construction, where I learned how to stitch and make clothes by hand, not digitally, by hand. So I was like, hey, you know what if we merge these two? And many people are doing it. I really wanted to know, and how do I take one step further and take this into a visual effects industry and a real time rendering industry, which is inside Unreal or inside Unity or gaming, or like doing a digital version of fashion show, or like, futuristic movies that could use these kind of techniques. So that's my background and how I plan to take the history of art into future, what you call the metaverse of fashion. Yeah. So apart from all the visual effects, we have a R&D on the side, which we do it over the weekend and in the night, late nights, between like couple of us, uh, where we are planning to create a like kind of a brand which experiments with digital fashion. It is not to make money or not to create anything as such. Right now, all we want to do is experiment. And how do we extend our knowledge of VFX into fashion industry is the goal of that particular brand. The brand will be called La Chicola,
Amazing.
and our brand baseline will be meta definition of tradition, where we will be focusing on all the tradition, not just Indian, but across the world eventually, and trying to bring and like store all the information that has been there for thousands of years into like one particular place where other people, like today's kids who don't know what like embroideries are because they've not physically ever seen it, they can understand that, hey, this is like how it was supposed to be, and now we can do the same thing in the digital space without wasting any material. I wanted to focus is the how all our cultures, like different part of the world, have different tradition, where we have embroideries and all the styles of different cloth, like textile design, as well as how do we use like all the textile design in bring it inside like computer, and make it a little bit easy for pretty much anybody to use it in future. Like say suppose if I were to collaborate with a XYZ fashion designer from the industry, and if they have a very heavy like wedding style embroidery or flowers and like stitches and things like that, then how do we make sure that we integrate that? We are working purely based on all those material related clothing. So how the lace works, how the threading works, how the stitches work, how the pleats work, things like that, and taking it further, like probably taking those things and making like shoes out of it, or like taking it into a headgear category, like things like that is what we are focusing. And once we have a like a working workflow for VFX, because VFX is a little bit tedious. It's not just like doing one fashion show or one particular way of doing, because there are multiple things that you have to integrate and multiple software that come in play. So like my keen interest would be whatever R&D that I do in making clothes, and we can do collaboration with other cool small or bigger brands in future, and then take that learning and apply that into visual effects industry.
Yeah, I think what innovations are you looking forward to, when it comes to meta fashion or digital fashion? We're obviously seeing a lot of, breakthroughs with, AI as well currently. And I've just seen some wonderful things, that artists using Mid-Journey and, similar
Dali.
stacks have, generated, and like right from like the most insane sneakers I've come across, right? So what are you looking forward to? And also like specifically, when it comes to like, we've seen how long cloth simulations take in an offline rendering process, but with a heavy push in real time, I'm curious to hear what you're really excited about in terms of breakthroughs, and what the significance of meta fashion, so to speak, is going to be in the years to come.
So the biggest impact, so like someone like me, while I have been very much intrigued with all the technology coming in, like including, as you said, Mid-Journey, Dali. Like as we speak, we work for years and years and years to develop something, and tomorrow, like AI comes in and they come up with something even cooler, and then you get a little bit more greedy, and like, okay, you know what? How do I use this now? That I've been planning this, but how do I pivot and try to integrate this as well? So that has always been a like kind of my what you call jealous side, which goes into computer and every day discovers something, and like try to utilize it at best of our abilities. And second part of it is like, how is that I've been very close to nature. Like I have been gardening and composting since I was like 25. Like in US and as well as Paris, they're very strict. You have to segregate all your garbage. I lived there from 2005 to 10. Then in Paris, I was living between 2013 to 17, 18, and they were very particular. And I came back to India again, and I'm here. People are doing whatever it pleases. Like if you want to throw something in the sea, they can throw it. So coming back to that is that, how do we use this particular technology to reduce our carbon footprint? Like say, hey, XYZ wedding dresses, or for example, some of the fashion designer, they have to make multiple itineraries, like probably thousands and thousands of those, and then realize that, hey, I can only sell 100 because there is not market for other 900. So instead of them doing that, they can pretty much do like a digital fashion where they can make it based on order, rather than like making things that are going to be wasted. And today's real estate, it's not just about what you make, also how you store it, because like that is becoming a biggest challenge in every part of the world, where people buy insane amount of clothes, and then after wearing it once or twice, they have to carry it for years and years just out of guilt, because they spend so much money buying it. So like removing that guilt, like if you're going to use that for one of the digital event, you made something by yourself and you used it in your metaverse party or something like that, and you're not obligated to buy particular piece, wear it all the time. You can just wear it once or twice, and that's it. And you can simplify your life, like your physical life in the world, and not have to collect every piece of like fashion that you acquired because you wanted to attend XYZ party. And that is one of the reason that I got more involved. Like I've been minimizing my wardrobe since last 10 years, and I've been pretty unsuccessful. And I'm hoping that after COVID, I have become better. And I think once, like last 2 years, if that continues, and the fashion, because like everybody else, I also get a little bit like curious. Hey, I want this, and if I can start having all of it digitally, and I can create my own digital avatar and put it on, that curiosity is gone, right? I don't have to physically own that piece.
Cool. I guess that's it. Any closing
Yeah.
notes or remarks? Thanks so much for joining us today.
So Thank you so much for having me. I just want to do like I want to make something that can be created, like other people should be able to follow and take it forward. Train the team that can lead this entire revolution forward. So, and I hope that many more people would like to become part of it.
Interesting. We have a question for Rutul. Question is, apart from reducing carbon footprint, what do you find exciting about digital fashion? Do you think we'll be able to send our designs made to order so we become the designers ourselves? Very interesting. What do you think, Rutul?
I think it should be possible. I think some of the people, like I know some of the art director friends of mine who actually started physical fashion companies. They've been doing that. They've been like testing the market, making only say 100 pieces or 50 pieces, like instead of making thousands and thousands of them, making smaller number based on the interest and orders. So if there are more people buying things based on order, that should reduce the fashion. Second part of this question, where like whether or not individuals will be able to create something which will be different. So in physical world, we have a restriction, right? We can't wear certain, like we can't wear metal shoes or we can't wear plastic coats. So in digital fashion, there is no restriction. Like you can pretty much experiment with whatever that appeals your eye rather than what works in the weather. And you can take any material, you can put live flowers and like make it bloom if you wish to, and see yourself, oh, you know what, if I was in this fantasy world, how will I be looking? So yeah, both these things are the interesting part. However, it's not as easy as like anybody picking mid journey and Dalian entering few words and doing it. It is little more complicated. So whoever wish to learn in detail and apply that, it's not impossible, but it's not as easy as like day to day people just plugging and putting it.
All right.
Totally agree. Yeah, I
So,
think that's a great perspective on this. And yeah, I think in a way it's good that it's not as easy as Dahlia Mid Journey, because you don't want so many people wearing the same clothes in the metaverse. It's good to have that real form of self-expression there. So I think that's pretty good. Thanks
well,
for joining us, Atul.
Thank you so much for having me. Such a wonderful show. Thank you for giving me platform. And I just saw previous panel. It's like fantastic work everybody is doing. I'm equally excited. So yeah, thank you for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.
thanks, Rutul. See you.
Bye.
See you, Atul. Bye.
All right. So we have some winners here, Karan.
Yep, time to announce the winners, right? I think we're there that time of the evening.
Correct, correct.
Wonderful. So I think, yeah, you want to announce the first raffle winner?
Absolutely. So the first raffle winner is Shantanu Singh from the UK. Congratulations, Shantanu.
Congrats, Shantanu. That's great. And about the social media giveaway winner, the winner of this is the Twitter user Caveman with a double N at the end of it. So,
Caveman.
Caveman, congratulations.